Welcome to the Visual Storytelling Podcast. My name is Fred Ranger, and I'm very happy today because we have a special guest on the podcast. His name is John Hendrick, and he is a San Antonio-based artist who was born in New York. The guy traveled a lot, like 20 years of traveling. Italy, Spain, Japan. We're going to talk about that later. But first off, John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks. I appreciate it. There's a question I have to get off because every time I listen to it, I'm thinking in the back of my head, is that intro yours? Is that you playing?
I wish it is from a platform that I use.
Oh, okay.
But it could have been
because I know you play.
Yeah.
So I was like, I wonder if he did that little intro.
Maybe I should do my next one. So I'll look into that.
You should. I always thought it was you. Okay. Well, okay. Well, that's good. Now I know. I'm good. Like you said, I'm here now in San Antonio, originally from New York. But yeah, thanks. I appreciate you having me, and cool. I look forward to this conversation.
We've been talking about having you on the show for a couple months, if not years, and we're both part of the very...
I don't know about years, but it's been a couple of months.
But we're part of the very intense and inspiring Leica Street Photography Collective, at least on the podcast side, and we have fun discussing gear and creativity and with all the people. But I think we were overdue for a conversation because there's so much I want to learn about you and your art and your photography and visual storytelling and what's your point of view on that. I know you're also into fashion. So again, we've got a lot to cover, but for the few people who are wondering who's John Hendrick, can you give us a bit of an overview on what brought you to photography and why you're still doing it today?
Yeah. We'll do the bluff, the snapshot.
Yeah.
So originally from New York, that's only relevant because I grew up skateboarding. You know, I'm 46. So my younger years were all like the big skateboarding years. I think that was like nationally everywhere.
Yeah.
And being in New York, I mean, that's, it's just like street photography, it's street skating, you know? So I say that because being a skateboarder, we always filmed each other. We always took pictures of each other. So I think I've always had a camera in my hand. As far back as I can remember us shooting pictures of each other or footage, trying to make, little sponsorship videos and stuff like that. I like you kind of hinted to the fashion stuff, but I've always been around art in one way or another. We'll just give real quick snapshots. My aunt, who's in Peru, she's a big fashion designer in Peru. She used to come to New York all the time, and she used to drag me to the city. So I remember going to like all these places with her and her husband. My uncle was antiquities dealer from Peru, so I remember going to like Sotheby's and Christie's like 7 and 8.
Nice.
So like I've always been around it. I've always just been around it. My dad used to love drawing. My grandfather used to love drawing. When my parents split, I spent a lot of time. My dad didn't want me to be in the streets, so he bought like easels and paint, and like he just kept me indoors, like drawing and painting and stuff. So I just always had a creative outlet. And skateboarding I think is a big piece of it. Graphics on boards, just stuff like that. So photography is just, I think, my outlet. It's just where I've landed as far as creativity.
The number of people and photographers who either came from skateboarding or music, it's incredible. Like it's those
it is
4 things, skateboarding, photography, music, and art in general. They're very, very close to each other. So it's cool to see that you're coming from that culture. How old is Tony Hawk? I was wondering, like is he
older
50
than me, so he's probably like early 50s.
Yeah, that's crazy. The dude still looks like if he's.
But I remember all those videos like as a kid.
Yeah.
My brother's 4 years older than me, so like even I got into skateboarding when I was like probably 7. But my brother was skateboarding, when he was like 7. So I was always around it. So
nice.
Yeah,
nice.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
And so talk to me a bit more about the first time you picked up a camera in your hand and you took that first blurry or not shot, and you're like, oh shit, okay, this is something I could be doing more, not just skateboarding, but also taking photos,
Yeah. So I think one of the cooler parts were, and I think the statute of limitations are gone, so I could just disclose, my brother stole a an enlarger from school, I think.
Oops.
I don't know from where.
Okay.
So he somehow they acquired one, and I had one in my house. And I remember going in the closet to put film in canisters, and then going to the bathroom and switching out the light bulb to a red light bulb, and like just doing enlarging film and developing. But like now that I think about it, I'm like, I'm so like aware of like the time, 3 minutes for this and 2 minutes for this. And like, I don't remember any of that when I was doing it as a kid, but I went home, this summer, and my mom still has like a lot of the shots that I enlarged.
Wow.
Like, she has them in the house, and I'm just like, man, how did I do that? Like, I don't know how I knew the process, but somehow I remember developing and enlarging and making prints in the bathroom. And I think that's when I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, But I still didn't get into it until 2008. Like you said, I've been all over the place. I was living in Spain at the time. To 2009, we found out we were going to have my daughter. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. I got so excited about having pictures in the house, family pictures and stuff. But I always had a camera, and I was just like, wait a minute, why don't I do it? So I enrolled in school. I enrolled into the Institute of Art, San Francisco, like an online program. And then that's when I was like, okay, I'm just going to go all in. And so I just started taking classes and really, really started like, being more aware and conscious of what I was doing as a photographer, per se,
And what was that first camera that you were referring to? Do you remember?
I still have it.
You still have it? Nice.
Still have it.
What is it?
My first digital camera was the Rebel.
Of course. The infamous
XT,
Rebel
the
TI
Rebel
or
XT.
XT? Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
I still have it.
Does
still
it
have the
work?
batteries. I guess if I get a charger, I could probably use it still.
Was that like 6 megapixel?
What lens did I have on this thing? I don't even know. 18 to 55, probably the kit lens.
Well, there you go. Like 3.5 to 10.9. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my God, probably 3.5 to 5.6.
Okay. No, that's
That's not too bad. I don't know what I was doing with this thing. I was just pointing and shooting.
Does it have the pop-up flash? That's very important in your first camera. Pop-up flash.
It had the pop-up flash.
But so you
I still have it. I don't know what made me keep it, but I'm so glad I still kept it.
I'll keep it. I mean, at this point, it'll become vintage at some point. It'll be like old camera. I don't know, like a cameras at some point, like in 20 years or something.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's very cool.
Nice. And so, speaking of creativity and what got you started in this whole trend of taking photos, was there a moment in time where you said, okay, I have the power to say something with that tool that's in my hand? And if yes, what was the realization? Like, how did you feel about being able, with one image, to convey emotions or a message?
I think if I can, like, when they do that thing, like, say, the first thing that pops in your head is usually the right answer, or the, not trying to be ingenuous. Yeah. Right now, thinking about it, a friend of mine was leaving Spain, and people were putting together like some kind of PowerPoint or something with a bunch of images. They were going to do a little party or whatever, and I had a lot of images because he would pick me up in his car, and we would like go for a road trip. But I'm talking like 6-7 hours. We would drive to like Sevilla or Barcelona and like just drive out there. I'd take the camera, and we'd stop for coffee, we'd stop to eat, and I would just photograph the whole thing, right? So I had a lot of those images. And then I put together my own images, aside from everyone else that had pictures of like them at the bar, like really crazy, pictures. And he fell in love with like one of them that I took of him. It was like a portrait of him in front of his car by this like real famous bridge in Ronda, I think. And then that's when I was like, oh man, that's kind of cool that like he really liked it, and I was just like, and yeah, it looked good too. But that was one of those moments where I originally thought like, oh man, I could take all these really cool pictures of people and like present them to them, like when they're leaving, that would be my gift, right? Like I have a whole bunch of pictures. I find the one I think is the most, sentimental, and then I would print it for them and give it to them. And then that kind of became my thing around like 2010, 2011.
Nice. It's so true what you're saying. I mean, my girlfriend and I just shot a weddings. We at a wedding. We don't shoot wedding, but it was a friend.
Oh yeah, I like that. That was fun. That looked fun.
And we sent the photos over. And again, I'm used to street photography and travel photography, where I look at the photos and a couple of other people are, oh, nice photo, that's great. But we sent the photos, and the bride wrote back that she was literally crying as she was going through the images, and she said, "You really were able to capture the essence." And I remember to myself, like, "Holy crap! Photography it can make someone cry." Can you one still image? So for me, that was like a good reminder of, yes, photography for fun, photography for documenting your life and so on, but you have the power to change somebody else's view on something or make them feel something. And again, that was a great, and I so agree with what you say. To different extent, you can actually help people go through difficult times, or you can put an image on something that happened that people cannot describe. It's again, that's the powerful part of photography that
I think so.
Sometimes we forget as street photographers and so on.
We definitely do. I think we get caught up in like, and now it would be the Instagram world, where it's like we get caught up in what's popular and not what's, I guess, like truly like. I questioned myself not too long ago, like a couple of months ago. I'm like, had to remind myself, why did I get into this? Like, why did I pick up the camera? Why did I go to school and all that stuff? And for me, it was my daughter. So it's like, okay, I have to like kind of reset, like, yeah, I'm going out, I'm taking pictures of the streets and, working all these compositions, but I'm not connected to the images, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I need to reconnect to like, not just going out there and shooting.
How many silhouette can you take in the street of New York, right? So that is just another.
Yeah, it's like
and
in a place like New York, forget it. I was there, you were there, and we were there just weeks apart.
Yeah.
So you can attest to it. Like you could stand in one corner and make a number of good images, right? At least a handful.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And if you have a couple of days in New York, forget about it. You're going to come home with a nice little combination of images. So, but like they'll mean something to you because they'll remind you of being there and stuff like that. And but I guess right now where I'm at is like, how do I connect? Like how am I really making someone feel something, right, with my images? I think that's where I want to be right now.
And this whole point about being intentional and connecting and making people feel something, I think that's something that in the social media, you attested to it and you mentioned it, it's something that it's getting lost in the trendy shit that's on social media. And for me, that is a struggle because you want to connect with other people, you want to show your work, you kind of have to be there. I mean, my discussion with Phil Penman, I think you've heard it, and also Ricky talked about it in his podcast. You have to be there. But it's a love-hate, right? Like you want to be able to do photography that you would connect with, but sometimes what gets the likes and the shares and so on is not the same type of work. So it's a dilemma. How do you deal with the whole social media and also having to be there versus personal projects? How do you manage that on there?
Yeah. So unfortunate for me was my original Instagram. When I became a Leica shooter, was called the Leica Journal. And I did one image a day for a full year. So 300, and I would number them like image 1, image 2, right, to 365. And I got a lot of traction. Like I was really feeding the machine and I was getting a lot. And then it got hacked or something. I lost the account. So my new account is relatively new. It's only like a year old. And when I had to redo it, I was like, oh, forget it. Like, I just curate it the way I want to curate it. So if you look at my Instagram, it's very like methodical. It's 3 images have something to do with each other. Whether it's 3 all black and white, 3 all color, 3 all film, 2 landscape, 1 hard, like portrait. Like I'm really methodical how I do it, and that's more for me to make it visually appealing as a whole strand. Like, like the images standing alone or whatever, they're just every other Instagram image, 2-second sweepers. But I think if you look at my whole grid, it's more, appealing. And so that's how I deal with it. And then I even said it at one time, I just changed my profile, but I used to say my profile was like, Instagram is my sketchbook. It's kind of where I just try to play with stuff and just put, like we were just talking about it. Like my last 3 images are in my house.
And they're beautiful.
Like has nothing to do with the black and white, have nothing to do with anything else. I'm just in a position where I'm just like, hey, I just want to, I got good lighting in the house and I kind of want to show it off, and a different side of me. I've never really opened up to like more of my personal side. So I was like, oh, this is kind of a cool segue to it. So that's kind of how I deal with it. Vero is the only other. I mean, we're in Greenery together. Mm-hmm. I haven't posted there in a long time, but Vero is kind of my new thing. And I think they're a good way to put this is Phil Pinman and me just connected on there. And it was because he put up a color photo or a couple. And I'm just like, oh man, I love seeing your color work.
Yeah.
Right. And he said, he was like, on his text to me, he was like, yeah, like kind of what you said, Instagram, he's got to feed that machine, right? And that machine is all black and white. So he's taking advantage to kind of put stuff that's not gonna, like disrupt his IG account. So that's I kind of do the same thing. Vero is kind of like more of I'm really using it as a social media platform. Yeah. Putting movies I like, putting books I like, really talking to people, showing more of like myself, the family. And IG has just become like a sketchbook for me. It's just a place for me to kind of throw things up and play with, how I would like things to look.
And I will say that I'm looking at your Insta, and I've never looked at it this way because on a computer, I'm always looking at it in a linear feed on the phone. And I will say that, wow, this is one well curated feed that you've got there. I'm a bit jealous of the meticulous approach to it and very clean. Yeah. And very thoughtful. So that I want to congratulate you. But I'm with you. I'm a big fan of Vero. And it's funny because I opened a Vero account in 2018 when it, kind of was.
Me too. A long time ago.
And I was like, well, there's nobody on the platform.
I didn't do anything on it.
So, but now, I mean, I think, who was it? I think it was
a couple months ago. We were together like a month or so ago.
Exact. And Fuji shooter, now he's on like Rask, actually said, oh, follow me on Vero. I'm like, oh, it's true, Vero. Let's give it another try. Now I see all these like photographers like boom, boom, boom. And the quality of the work and also the fact that it's not algorithm driven. So the people you follow are chronologically placed in the feed. Yeah, that for me is like, wow, this was Instagram like back in 14. I don't know when it was like that, but it got me there. And the fact that actually Vero themselves, like the social network, are pushing photography. They're actually using Insta to push back to photographers on Vero, which is very clever.
I know. It's so funny. There's a guy, TJ Marbos.
Okay.
I hope I'm not butchering his name. Do you know him?
No.
He is if I'm not mistaken, he's like the digital, his title is like CTO of Vero Labs. Okay. So he kind of does like the background stuff, right?
Yeah.
And this is just a testament to Vero. Like my first couple of weeks on there, somehow we connected.
Yeah.
Oh, I posted some stuff about the military and stuff like that. And he was like, oh, my dad was in the military. And we kind of did similar objectives, similar jobs, right? He did a lot of medevac missions and flew helicopters or something like that. So we connected to the point where he was just like, hey, you know how you could do acquaintances, friends, and whatever?
Oh, yeah,
like
the levels.
He connected with me that way so that we can call each other.
Nice.
And then he was like, hey, are you free on the weekend? We should talk, And it's just like...
That's the CTO of Vero.
Yeah, like, what? Like,
okay. Yeah.
So I think that's a testament to what that platform is really doing, right?
I agree.
It's not just a show,
No, exactly.
Those guys are really like about social networking. Like, hey, I like what you're doing. We connect somehow, and we're gonna connect.
And if you're the CMO of Vero, you're like, I like what Instagram's doing. They're killing the platform for photographers. Come, photographers. Yeah. We don't have all that BS, algorithm, ad-driven stuff. But they will have to make money at some point. They're a business like anybody else. But at least the foundation is there for a healthy or healthier. Well, we don't know where it's going to go, but healthier way of consuming photography videos and books and so on and so forth. So
yeah,
really
I just
it.
like that you can give more, right? Like even if it's all photography centric, like I can talk about a book I like,
Exactly.
like and post it, like
Yeah.
or a movie. Like it's just I just like the way it's curated.
It's very clever.
And,
Very
and
clever.
I mean everyone's talking about it, so I don't want to beat that too much, but it's definitely a good place to be.
I agree. Yeah, and you also dabbled a bit in the YouTube space. I've saw a couple videos, and I think you were So and by the way, you have a video called Downsizing that I really like, getting rid of some stuff, and I also have a video that talks about the fact that I'm downsizing. But now I'm here, and we just discussed before the show me buying another camera. So how's your downsizing going? That's my question.
So I got rid of a lot.
Good
just
for you.
Within the last month. Yeah. I got rid of, I used to have the silver M240, which was my first Leica with a 50 Summicron. I also had the M246, so the black and white version of that one, the monochrome. I had a 35-7 Artisan, which I got for like a birthday present. I had the Fuji TX1, which was the Expand variant. And I mentioned all of those because I got rid of all of that.
Wow.
Yeah, I got rid of all of that. I got rid of the 50 Summicron. I'm about to sell the 90 I have. And I say all that because my downsizing is I'm always going to keep the Q. I have a Q, and I got that so that it's just easy for me to capture all my daughter's stuff. She's a swimmer. She does all this stuff. And as well, this kind of this discussion with the SL, right? Like, it's fun to have manual focus, but not when I'm trying to like capture my daughter running around, right?
Exactly.
So the Q is perfect for that, right? It's small, lightweight, easy, take it, cool focal length, and I use it for all her events. So the Q probably will never go anywhere. And I don't need the Q2 or anything. The Q is perfect for that stuff for me. And then I got the MP240, and mostly because it's still a black paint brass, right? And now to get a black paint anything is ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
So I could still get the cool brassing of an M paint, of a black paint, I should say. I'm sorry. And I took a workshop, and on one of the workshops I took, they were talking about, and I didn't know this, and I may have referred to this on one of the other podcasts I was on, but I didn't realize that lenses had like kind of designations to them. Like the 50 is kind of like the observer, and the 35 is considered like a participant.
Okay.
So your images look like you're a participant, and the 50 kind of makes your images look like voyeur, right?
Yeah,
like you're
makes
kind of
sense.
just
Makes
watching,
sense.
right?
Yeah.
And then part of that workshop, we were talking, and it was like, what would you want to do? Like, where do you want to approach photography? Now, I've always shot 50 because that's how I started, but that's not, I want to be more of a participant. So I was like, okay, I'm getting rid of the 50 Summicron. I got the 35. And like, so everything I've done, and the monochrome, I got rid of the monochrome because they were like, who's one of your favorite artists? And I'm just like, okay, like Elliot Erwitt, but that's just because I like the way he did candids of like Marilyn Monroe and stuff like that. But Alex Webb is truly who I gravitate towards,
Yes.
Very complex compositions and color, right? So I'm just like, okay, so do I really need a monochrome? Like if I really like this guy's work, so I was like, I'll go back to color. And so forcing myself to have one M camera and one M lens, which is now the 35, and the color MP240 is kind of how I'm going to roll from here on out.
But I think you have an M film too, right? The M3, if I'm not mistaken.
I do the film, but that's because, my situation with film. I get so much of it.
Yeah.
I kind of have to have a film camera.
Yes. And I want to thank you publicly for sending me film, but right before my trip to Italy. So some of the shots you're seeing on my feed on Grainery and so on are, gracefully provided by John's generosity of film. He got a couple rolls at home. I mean, we don't have to go into the details of why, but you've got a lot of.
I'm going to send you some stuff.
Okay, I'm always open. I'm keeping the M6, by the way, so I'm not getting rid of the M6. I don't think I will get rid of the M6
I didn't
ever.
Think you would. I didn't think you would. You got to keep that. That's a good film camera.
But M10, I can always go back to an M at some point in my life. M digital, I mean, if I want to. But and for me, it's about that eyesight, right? So it's not going well on that front. I'm 42 on my side, and as soon as I hit 40, all of a sudden, anything that's close. I mean, it is a normal phenomenon, but I was not ready for it. I was like overnight, boom! I cannot see anything from a close distance. So I will have to stop pretending I can focus that rangefinder patch on a digital M. I get, I was getting better and better at it, but I think I'm getting lazy with this Q2 and this bright EVF, and so it's gonna be an SL. And again, I like to try stuff, and it makes sometimes it can spark creativity just to get a new piece of gear. And I'm not encouraging anyone to buy new gear. I'm actually trying to find a used. That's the point. But and it's also a swap, right? So I'm encouraging people to try stuff, but only if they have the money, and if they're swapping something for it. Yeah. So that's also something.
And that's what I did. I sold everything to like KEH and MPB.
There you go.
And then I just used their they have like some kind of deal. Like if you trade in, you get like 10% off your purchase. Everything came out relatively like equal. Yeah, I did give up a lot of stuff, but I mean, I got a 35 Simulex. So.
How do you like the 35 Simulex? For me, it's my favorite lens on the planet. I really love it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And I've always wanted a black body with a chrome lens. I always thought that was really cool looking. So now I have that. So I'm super happy, with what I have.
Nice.
Yeah.
So let's go.
Trade in. Don't just buy stuff.
No. And especially if it's like, you can, it can go fast. Trust me.
Yeah.
So let's go back to visual storytelling. So, which is the point of this podcast. So you started telling stories, way back when. How would you say your storytelling has evolved throughout the years? How would you describe? How do you actually envision a story? How you capture a story? How you think about capturing a story? So talk to me a little bit more about your process of visual storytelling.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, like I said at the beginning, for me, it was just mostly the only reason I went to school and kind of wanted to really learn something was because prior to that, I was just the guy with the camera. So I was just, we'd go, I've been fortunate, like you said, I lived in Italy. So like whenever I went anywhere, I would just take a camera, but I was more of like tourist mode, like just taking pictures of the Colosseum and, Venice or Leaning Tower of Pisa, all that stuff, and then with the occasional group shots and stuff like that. When you go to school, obviously you learn a lot more. You learn, like, oh man, there's more to it, like compositionally wise and, color theory and stuff like that. And then that became, more of like, so school was great living overseas. It was in Spain and it'd be like, oh, we're doing leading lines. So then I'd be like, okay, let me find a cool place to go visit and just do leading lines. So I would go to like a mosque. I'd go to like Cordoba or something and go crazy, And then, so every assignment was like that. I was just traveling to do the assignment. So that became like my thing, that was a long time. That was like my last 2 years there was literally just shooting according to what the genre was. Right. So I would say that sprint was more academic sound. Since then, it's more of like what I told you with capturing friends and family. Then I was like, okay, now I know how to take an image. And, I would always refer back to my friend Mike and his picture when he was leaving. And I was like, okay. And what's funny is my friend, I had left Spain and he was in Italy and they broke into his house and they stole like his computer and everything. And I had attended like his son's baptism because I was like his godfather and all this stuff. And I had pictures, but my good and bad thing is I don't really send people tons of images. Like I'll send them like one or two, but I always have a backlog of a lot of stuff, right? That they never see.
And so you had pictures of all of his stuff that was stolen.
Yeah. So he was like, man, they stole all my, stole all his material stuff, but all his pictures and stuff. And then I started feeding him stuff that I had, like us going to Capri, and like when son was a baby and stuff. And he was like, oh my God. So then that became my thing. So what I would do is I'd go visit friends. I'd take tons of pictures And then I wouldn't release the photos for like a year or two later. Like I'd send a picture of my friend and his son, and he'd be like, "Oh my God, like I remember that day." Yeah. And that's really cool. It takes a lot to hold on to something for that long and then release it. But that emotion and that expression is really cool. It's really cool when someone gets something like years later and be like, "Oh my God, like that's such a cool image," like I forgot all about that. So then that became my thing. I would always go be the guy who's just taking all these candid shots, hold on to them, and then spring it on people like out of the blue, right?
Yeah.
And then DC, when I got the Leica, really turned the switch on to like more of like the fine art, street photography stuff.
So would you recommend going to school? Because a lot of people are debating, like, they want to take their photography
school?
to the next. Yeah. So should you invest time or is YouTube enough?
I think it depends on the type of person. I think I say that because some people can, like me, I need structure. I can jump on YouTube, but I don't know what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Like I'd stumble on a video and it'd be like, composition, be like, okay, cool. Like, but the videos are, even if they're 20 minutes, they're kind of like all over the place, And I think for a person like me who's very structured, I need like, all we're doing is leading lines. All we're doing is frame within a frame. All we're doing is juxtaposition. Like I needed that so that I could do a longer span and concentrate on just one thing before I move into the next thing, right? Because on a video, if you give me a video on composition, you tell me 3 different topics, I walk away great with 3 different topics, but which one do I practice? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I prefer to get it in bite-sized amounts. Also, I think academics is good because I see a lot of people doing stuff and they give themselves a lot of praise and they don't realize that that's been done like years before. You know what I mean? And granted, you stumbled upon it, but it's nothing new. And I think that's the hard part with like Instagram or something. A lot of people flock to people, but don't realize like, that comes from somewhere, like someone else has done it, and I think you kind of have to pay like a little homage to like where it came from, right? And I think it's good to know the origins of stuff. So I think having a good academic background and being like photo literate is something that I think more people should do. Granted, I know you do videos on books and some other people do videos on books, and that's great, at least that much, right? But there's a lot of people that don't even do that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not what gets the most views, but it's what makes me the most happy because people are commenting like, "Oh, I didn't know about." I mean, even yourself, you're like, "Oh, I didn't know that book." And for me, I think I'm at that point. I think you're totally right. And the Aaron Slim book that I discovered recently, I didn't even know who Aaron Slim. I didn't go to school for photography or anything like that, so I didn't know the guy. It came from a comment on Greenery. Thank you, Greenery, on one of the photos that my girlfriend took in Italy. And he said, "Oh, very reminiscent of Aaron Slim." And we're like, "Oh, who's Aaron Slim?" And then we went like, "Holy crap, it's true." And wow, Aaron Slim was such a great photographer. And now we're buying books and stuff. So I think to your point,
that's cool.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
It's that other side of photography that doesn't get a lot, of creds online and on YouTube and on Instagram. That I think when you hit a certain level, making an image is easy. Making a good image is now very easy with all those bells and whistles we have on our cameras. If you look at a Sony A7 IV, you point the damn thing to anything and it'll grab focus on. Exactly, everything's automated. Yeah. Even computational photography. So I think when you hit that threshold, you're like, okay, how can I invest more time understanding what I'm doing? And trying to bring something, and not necessarily you're going to succeed, but at least you're trying to understand where it comes from, where you want to go as an artist, and so on. And I think this is what I can understand from the conversation we're having today, that school plus, looking into other ways to tell your story, and understanding where it comes from, it's a very important process of photography, of telling stories.
I think so. But it's today it's so fast moving that I think a very few amount of people actually go to school unless they're doing like photojournalism, like very specific. Nobody would just go for like, I shouldn't say nobody, but I don't think of high demand for people just to go learn photography.
I think
the bare bones of photography.
I think Ricky went, but he was not super happy with the whole program or something. I don't know. I forgot what he said.
He did photojournalism too. So
yeah.
Once again, very specific, right?
It's pretty tough.
Yeah, but
workshops.
I don't know.
Do you like workshops? Do you take workshops? Do you teach workshops? Like, what's your view on that?
Yeah, right. I think that's a good topic. Also, I think the sense. I think workshops. Everybody I've listened to, like who's anybody. Mm-hmm. In their interviews, in their a lot of the interviews when they're guests on stuff, they always at one point in the conversation talk about a workshop they've done.
Yep.
With somebody.
Yep.
So I always felt like there was a link there. So me myself, I've just recently done a number of workshops. I mean, probably too many in a short period, but I'm trying to do as many as I can and kind of put my money in that as opposed to new lenses and new gear. Because I think there's something to that. I think you can accelerate your path, whatever your path is, much faster and direct if you can get on a workshop with someone who you admire, who you like, who you kind of relate to, and kind of get, that knowledge from them to help you cut some of the bumps and bruises of any other path. They can streamline your path a little bit more. So I'm a proponent of workshops. I think I just did one and it was amazing for someone like me, talking about the lens, like I told you, when they talk about perspective and what lenses give what perspective. The workshop also talked about like how they judge, it was very specific to the workshop I was at, but they talked about how certain photography contests, not that I'm into that, but that was a workshop, how they're judged, and it's basically criteria of like lighting, gestures, colors.
Okay.
Very easy, right?
Yep.
And you think about that, you'd be like, okay, if I'm a judge, it can't all be subjective, right? There has to be points, right? Because we're all judging. We can't all just be subjective because you're gonna get 5 different votes, right?
Yeah.
So I, it's good to know that that's kind of like a process. Okay, lighting makes sense, right? Like you shoot at, good lighting. Gestures, I never really thought of that, but I get it. And now when I look at images, I get it even more. It could be hand gestures, it could be body position, it could be facial expressions, but there's something, right? And then colors. I mean, I know there's a lot of monochrome shooters and black and white shooters, but I get the color part too. It's another complexity. It's another layer to photography, right? And then layers itself. If you put more layers in your image, you give it more depth and more dimension. It's not so 2-dimensional, right? So I think all that to say, I think workshops are really good.
I completely agree, but I feel like workshops. It's like finding the right therapist, right? Like you try a couple and some people will connect more with you or where you're going or where you're at in your journey. And some people have good experiences, bad experiences. It's like saying what makes a good image, it depends. It depends on what you like. You just describe what's important for you. And what we're looking at is, it's like you say, what makes a good song? I don't know. Is it the solo? Is it the chorus? Is it the whole thing? Is it the sound and everything?
Is it the hook?
Exact. So, and some people like, Imagine Dragons, and some people like Rage Against the Machine. Again, it's very, very different taste. So I think to your point, finding that right fit is as important as the workshop itself. You have to look at the person who's doing the workshop and the work they do. Again, some people might really like what Valérie Jardin is doing with one camera, one lens, very simple composition, and so on and so forth. And some people might prefer something a little bit more like Phil Penman, who's like majestic black and white stories of New York and so on. So that's very very interesting. And the good news is that I think workshops save kind of the photography industry, because a lot of those photographers, I don't know if it's the same in your neck of the wood, but man, photography is a hard thing to live from, as to earn a living.
Yeah, forget it.
So thank God people are interested in photography and paying for workshops and one-on-one sessions and so on and so forth. Because if you are a working documentary photojournalist, good luck on making a living out of it. So I don't know how it is in the States, but in Canada, it's not a lot of photographers these days, like pure photographers.
No, I think you're right. And I think people need to look at it as like when you buy a lens, you buy a 28, right? And you use it for, let's say, even a couple months or a year, and then you're just like, I want to try a 50. Workshops are the same, right? You got to look at it in that sense, like, I'll take this workshop, and if it's great, it's great, and if it's not, then I'll look into another one. But I think a lot of stuff, people, and this is going to sound horrible, but I think it takes a lot. It takes a little bit of homework on the individual's part.
Yeah.
And sometimes people want stuff so quickly that they're just like, it can become overwhelming to be like, there's like 7 different workshops. Like, who do I take it with? Well, you got to do your homework, right? You got to look at the people's work, and you got to look at, read their bio.
Yeah, that's a good place to start.
Where they came from and what they did. I don't know how many people actually know people's bios.
Yeah.
They know the photographer.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised at a lot of times when people interview people and they're like, I didn't know you did this, and it's just like, well,
I didn't know Phil Penman was a paparazzi before doing all this street work. But so quick question regarding photographers, because I think that's a very interesting topic, and I want to have your point of view. Do you think there are still today photographers that will be regarded, in like 20, 30 years, just like we're looking at Elliot Erwitt and Soil Leiter and all these guys? Because it's funny. It's like when we're in the era, it's hard to see that,
it.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So do you think we have photographers that we see or hear about that are at that level? And is it still even possible today to match the grandiose work that the guys did 20, 30, 50 years ago?
I think it's going to take something like a Vivian Meyer, because she's relatively new.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
I think it's going to take something like that, where Phil Penman, I think, is a good one.
Yep.
Like that is a great person that you've had the opportunity to talk to him. Ricky has too. And God knows who's been able to take his workshops. But I think that's something people should really pay attention to, because years from now, like you think of Ralph Gibson, it's like $3,500 for a private session with him.
Yeah.
Phil Penman is like $500 or $1,000. You know what I mean? Like that's relatively cheap, right?
Yeah.
To get in now. I think Phil Penman's one, and I think going back to Vivian Meyer, I think it's going to take someone to have a strong body of work that very few people have seen, and something unfortunate happens or something, and then somehow it comes to light.
Yeah.
Because people are never really acknowledged during their time. It's very rare,
I mean, poor
I don't know.
Soil Leiter died, and nobody knew about him, and then he became this legend, and now there's books, and he's making money, but the estate is making money now versus when he was alive. It's crazy to think about that.
It is crazy. I don't know, because the saturation's so high, people don't get enough time, and the light on people right now is like, it's like trends, right? It's like for the next end of this year, next couple of months, somebody may be like the hottest thing, and then January, February comes around and someone else. I so
like what you're saying.
It's hard to keep that pedal down.
Exact, right? but I think you're right, John. I think there's someone out there who's been photographing for the past 10 years, a subject or a story or a region or whatever, and we haven't seen it yet. And when we're going to see, we're going to be like, like the first time, I guess, our parents heard the first Beatles album. You're just like, my brain cannot process it, right? It's like, So hopefully there's a guy like that. Or a woman.
Because I think the things that are going to be relevant are, and it's always been like that, the long bodies of work, big bodies of work. Phil Penman, I think, said it on your podcast. I think he said it, where he's like, some people like talk to him and he's like, so how long you been photographing? They're like 3 years. And, he's like, well, you don't even have a body of work yet. Like it's like to build a true substance, it takes years, like decades. So I think, we don't know yet, because those projects may be ongoing, right?
But John, this guy has 155,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel. He must be a great photographer.
Yes. We'll say yes.
Yeah. We won't make any enemies on this podcast today. No, but I think it's just to say that at the end of the day, and I really like where the conversation's going, because what we're telling the visual storytelling podcast audience is that if you want to be recognized, or if you actually want to be complete in your art, please stop looking at what looks like, is the trend, or what looks like a successful photographer. And by the way, no offense, if somebody has 1 million followers and is a successful photographer, kudos, and I'm happy for that person. But what I'm seeing more and more is people looking up to YouTubers and Instagrammers and influencers, and it might not be the best way to progress in your art. It's a good way to be inspired or to find your own style and so on. But I think what we're saying, John, is that you might want to do a little bit more research, a little bit more on the history of photography, and it will bring you more value at the end of the day than just swiping and putting your thumb on a 1 second image in a reel to try to stop it. I want to see the photo up.
It's easy to get captivated by people, and what they're doing, and then be like, "Oh, I want to do that too," right?
Yeah.
But I think if and that's great if that's what you want to do. But if you're trying to aspire to leave some kind of legacy, then you kind of have to step away from that. And really, what I heard a lot of my workshops, I did one with Joseph Michael Lopez, JML.
Nice.
The Leica photographer.
Yeah.
So I did one with him, and I did one with the Crit House. I don't know if you watched that episode on YouTube. Yep. I did that, and they gave me the same feedback, which is, and it's hard when you hear it when because like, well, what am I taking from that? But it was the common thread was being vulnerable, right? Mm-hmm. And it's easy to throw. Well, I shouldn't say it's easy, but it's typical to hear words like that, and then like, okay, so what do I do with that, right? And what I'm trying to get at is, if you're trying to leave a legacy or do a strong body of work, then you really have to do some self-reflection. Decide what you want to do. What do you really want to do, and what do you want to say? And you can still keep Instagram and stuff like that, but like, there's going to be a stronger body of work that people may not see, that you're kind of working on behind the scenes, and just understand that that's a longer game, right?
Consistency.
You're not going to get the likes overnight and 1,000, 5,000 followers, next year. But I think at the end game will be more substantial.
It's funny. We keep referring to Phil Penman, and we did discuss that he reminded me of Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't know if you know the guy, very successful. Yeah. And one of his point, and early in my career, I was looking up to him on the business side of things. And one thing that stuck with me, he was always referring about the difference between making an impact or having an impact and leaving a legacy. Which one is more important to you? A lot of people will say, I want to have an impact. I want to feel it now, like instant gratification. Some other people will say, you know what? I don't care about having an impact today. I want to leave a legacy. Well, guess what? Yeah. One takes a shitload more amount of time than the other to build and to learn from. So I think it's a great way of talking about photography. But what keeps you motivated, John? Because like any other photographer, storyteller, I'm sure you wake up sometimes and you're like, don't feel like going out and shoot. How do you get out of the creative rut? A lot of people are writing to me, and they want me to ask the photographers I'm interviewing, how do you get out of a creative rut, and how do you stay motivated?
Yeah. So for everyone listening, I would say we have to go back to finding a mentor, finding a tutor, and even if that means you have to kind of come a little bit out of pocket, $200 for a session is basically like a coffee a day for the month, nowadays, right? So it's not asking for a lot. And if you have to wait and save to do, a $200, $300 session with someone, I think it'll be well worth it. So I say that because the reason I've seeked out all these workshops and all these mentorships is because I was kind of there, one of your podcasts, I just heard it today. You were talking to, I can't remember, but from the Street Photographer magazine. What's his name?
Yes, Bob Peterson.
Patrick?
Bob Peterson.
Oh, Bob Peterson.
Yeah.
Patrick. Yeah. he said it. He was like the imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Right. He was feeling it for a while. I think it happens to all of us, and it happened to me too. And now kind of like the gear change for me was, one of these people that I've talked to kind of told me, they were like, okay, you're going to do this. And for me, I'll just tell you guys, but for me, it was like, take a picture at night and at morning, like right before you go to bed and right when you wake up, and just do that for a while and see what that body of work looks like. Right. And I'll tell you, a couple of weeks in, at the first, you're kind of like, okay, what do I do? A selfie in the mirror, like you're really dumb, right? I'll
selfie with my
really
Leica
dumb.
Camera with the red dot.
Yeah. But what happens is then you get to a point where it's just like you almost start capturing the routine. It's not so curated or structured, right?
Yeah.
It becomes more loose. And for me, this is what I've learned about the vulnerabilities. I've never really talked about the military or what's happened to me. Like I was a medic. I got, decorations of valor. I saved lives. I lost some lives out there. And all that, like I was combat promoted. I had a lot of distinction and did very well, but all that comes at a cost, right? So now I'm retired, but, and this is just me being vulnerable and trying to embrace it all, because I think it's going to express itself in my photography the more I talk about it. So like I got seen at the TBI clinic. I have no short-term memory. I have PTSD, depression, anxiety, and I'm an extrovert. So that's like a lot for me because, like I love being around people. I love talking, but like I go to a restaurant, I can't have my back towards the door. Like I have a lot of issues.
Wow.
And I say all that because now in this assignment, like I'm just like, okay, in the morning, and I never took pictures of this, but I always have to have, here, I'll show you. I always have to have Post-its.
Yep.
And I write down stuff because I can't remember.
Got it.
Right. And even it's such a joke in the house that like my daughter, if she needs me to pick something up, she'll go write it for me.
She's like, let's save a step.
Yeah. She's like, let me write it down because you'll forget. Right. But I started taking pictures of that. Right.
Oh, wow.
And like I have this thing, it looks really stupid. I wish I could find it, but I don't know where it's at. It's basically a light you put on your head, and then you put an image on the wall, and then you use your head to kind of like outline the design.
Oh, wow.
I get a lot of headaches, and it kind of takes your mind away from thinking of, the headache. It gives you something else to think about. So I started photographing stuff like that. So like I'm tapping into and expressing and showing more of like the stuff that I probably would never have done, So I think to get out of the photographic rut, I think you really have to embrace whatever makes you,
Wow. That's very powerful.
Trying to go out there and do landscapes, because you can get tired of doing landscapes, and stop trying to do the street photography and standing in the corner and doing this and that, and maybe switch gears and look into yourself and see what makes you unique, and then try to capture that. And that's what I would tell people. Try to make a little story of that, or a little, collage or a little assignment for yourself on whatever it is that makes you. And I think that's going to turn out to be a longer project than you think. And it may be more impactful when people see it. So.
That is so powerful what you're saying, John. And thanks for opening up. I think it's for the benefit of a lot of other people, because just like when you're showing vulnerability, a lot of people can relate. We're all vulnerable at some point in our lives, and we all have experiences, good and bad. And when somebody opens up, and you and me and everybody who likes photography have the power to do that, to tell their own story. And again, I think this is very powerful, because this is the whole point of me starting this podcast and having you sharing your story like that. I think other people can really like, you know what? Instead of just taking a photo of a tree tomorrow, nothing against photos of trees. There's very nice photos of trees, but why don't I
get a lot of likes?
Yeah, exactly. But why don't I take a slightly different angle and show a portion of me? And it doesn't have to be yourself in the photograph, but it has to be, I think this is where it's getting very powerful. It has to be from you, or it has to represent you. So I think I'm giving the listeners something to think about, and you're actually giving them an assignment, not without telling them it's an assignment, but go back to your drawing board and think about it. And it's the difference between having an impact, nice photo on Instagram, likes. This is great. It gives you dopamine for a little while. but then leaving a legacy, and not leaving a legacy for the world to see, leaving a legacy for your family, for your daughter, for your brother, for your friend. That, I mean, you talked about the photograph you sent to your friend. I talked about the photographs I sent to somebody who was getting married, the wedding. So again, it's for me, it's really, I have a light bulb moment with talking with you. So thank you for sharing that, because I think it's very powerful, and the listeners of this podcast might have, again, something to think about. It's not about the gear. Of course, the gear is fun. The gear helps, and we're all gearheads. We have a show that actually wasn't supposed to be about gear, but we end up talking about our lenses and our cameras, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But,
always.
But that's not the point of visual storytelling, of photography, of videography. It's about, again, very powerful from you, but it's about, a story that comes from you or that represents you. Very, very powerful. John, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. We've shared so many great insights. What's next? I don't know. It's kind of a weird question, but what do you have in mind for your next, photographs? Is it just some personal stuff, very family stuff, or do you have a little project in mind moving forward?
Two things I'm working on is kind of the Alex Webb stuff, and you can see more of that on Vero. It's kind of where I'm putting more of that stuff, more complex, trying to be more complex with my images. And then the long project is kind of what I stumbled upon with this thing that I just, and knowing your podcast and what it is, it's kind of, I already had it in mind that I was going to kind of disclose that for you, because it's really storytelling, I think, in its true essence. But I think it's going to be that. I think I'm going to embrace all of that and find a way to capture it and I don't know, present it. I'm going to find a way to present it, and I think people can relate.
I think they will, and I think there will be a lot of questions and a lot of people interested in learning more about the background on a photograph or on a body of work. So I'll be the first one in line to go see the show or watch it wherever you're going to publish it, and definitely will share with the audience here your next moves. And again, I want to thank you so much. It was a very cool conversation, a very inspiring conversation. And now I've got also some things to think about, and you're giving me some ideas. So we'll definitely stay connected. I'll put the links that you mentioned. We'll put our Vero down there. Let's stop the Instagram stuff, and let's put our Vero down there and our granary stuff, so we can connect on other platforms that we feel are a little bit more aligned with where we want to go. And so thank you so much, John, and we'll speak soon in another platform, another podcast, maybe in person at one point if I go to San Antonio, or if you come out east, or
if I come up there.
So take care, my friend, and talk to you soon.